Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Logan Carter always believed his life was under control. A regular guy, hardworking, devoted to his family and his own principles. Married for over 12 years to Claire, a woman who, in everyone's eyes, was simply flawless. Intelligent, charismatic, with a charming smile that seemed capable of lighting up any room. They were the kind of couple neighbors admired, friends praised, and relatives used as an example. At least, that's what Logan believed, until that day. It all started on a completely normal morning, at least, it seemed like one. Claire was rushing to get ready. As she fixed her bag, checked documents, grabbed her laptop, and in the middle of the chaos, casually mentioned she'd have a busy day. She said the company was tightening deadlines, that an urgent delivery would require her presence all day, and that she'd probably come back later than usual. Logan, suspecting nothing, just nodded, wished her a good day, gave her a quick kiss on the cheek, and went back to organizing things at home before starting his remote workday. But when Claire left, something strange lingered in the air. Logan couldn't exactly explain what. It wasn't a clear suspicion, not a piece of evidence, not a concrete fact. Just that uncomfortable feeling deep inside, that weird intuition you can't explain but keeps bugging you. Maybe it was the rushed tone in her voice, maybe her eyes avoiding direct contact when he tried to look closer, maybe the overly hurried way she moved, like she wanted to escape. He tried to ignore it. Tried to carry on with his morning normally, checking emails, organizing tasks, replying to messages. Until almost an hour after Claire left, Logan noticed something on the kitchen table. Her phone. Right there. Forgotten, vibrating silently, the screen flashing discreetly. For a few seconds, he stood still, just watching the phone vibrate. Then he read the notification that appeared on the locked screen. A short, direct message that felt like a knife piercing his chest. Can't wait to see you today. That meeting room, just ours. Logan froze. His blood seemed to freeze too. For a moment, he thought maybe he had misread it. Maybe it wasn't meant for Claire, maybe it was a mistake, a silly coincidence, perhaps even an inside joke. But when he looked at the sender, the truth hit him like a punch to the gut. Daniel Hayes. Claire's coworker. A familiar face. Someone who ironically had sat at their dinner table, eaten barbecue made by Logan, held a beer while laughing at jokes told in the backyard, pretending to be a friend, pretending to be loyal. Shock gave way to an uncomfortable emptiness. His hands began to sweat. His heart raced. Logan stared at the phone like he was holding a bomb about to explode. His mind screamed telling him he should leave it alone, wait, pretend he hadn't seen anything. But his instinct said otherwise. It told him there was a much bigger truth hidden here, something far more rotten than he was prepared to uncover. He took a deep breath, picked up the trembling phone, hesitated for a moment. He glanced at the door, as if expecting Claire might suddenly return and catch him red-handed. But she didn't come back. And then, he unlocked it. Typed the password he knew by heart. After all, they had always trusted each other. Or so he thought. As soon as he opened the gallery, everything collapsed. Photos, dozens of them. Some videos. Screenshots of conversations. All stored there so naturally, like this was part of Claire's life for a long time. And, in fact, it was. Logan just didn't know. The first images were enough to make his legs weaken. There they were. Claire and Daniel. Holding hands inside the car. Hugging, smiling, kissing in the company parking lot. And what hurt the most, photos from a motel room in the neighboring town. She, who always claimed business trips, important meetings, unavoidable happy hours, she was there, in another man's arms. With every swipe on the screen, more evidence surfaced. They were having a relationship. Not a recent fling. This was something built, nurtured, maintained secretly like two teenagers living a forbidden adventure. There were audio messages. Voice notes Logan needed courage to listen to. And when he pressed play, it felt like the ground opened beneath his feet. "You make me so happy. I never imagined I could feel something like this again. I want to see you today. Just today isn't enough, but it's all we have, for now. If I had the courage, I'd walk away from everything. Just so we can truly live this." And Daniel's reply, to complete the blow to his chest, "We deserve it. I just hope you make that decision soon. I'm here, waiting for you." Logan's face turned pale. His whole body trembled. His breathing became heavy, labored, like the very air had thickened and become harder to inhale. He tried to stay calm. Tried not to break anything, not to scream, not to throw that phone against the wall. But the impulse was there. Because at that moment, he understood that his entire life, everything he believed, everything he built, simply no longer existed. He sat in the chair, put his hands over his face, and stayed there for a few minutes trying to organize his thoughts. But they came disordered, tangled, violent. While he tried to understand, flashes of his own life came crashing into his mind like shards cutting through his thoughts. He remembered birthdays, trips, Christmas dinners with family, plans, conversations about having children, dreams built together. All tainted. All dirty. All fake. He stood up, walked back and forth, pressed his hands against his head, as if that could stop the thoughts hammering inside. But they didn't stop. On the contrary, they grew clearer, stronger, crueler. He began remembering the times Claire said she was exhausted. The flimsy excuses. The last-minute cancelled plans. The phone calls she answered in the car, away from him, speaking softly, looking sideways, saying it was work. At that moment, he realized it wasn't just betrayal. It was the lie. It was the fact that while he dedicated himself, gave everything, did everything to maintain that house, that marriage, that life. Claire smiled at another man. Offered her best to someone else. And Daniel. Daniel pretended to be his friend, shook his hand, looked him in the eye, shared jokes, while behind his back, stole the most sacred thing a man can have, trust. But in the middle of all that pain, all that collapse, something inside Logan started to change. Sadness, which came like a heavy suffocating wave, began giving space to something else. A coldness he had never imagined he carried inside. A cruel, merciless clarity. And for the first time, he understood. Understood that he wasn't facing a simple betrayal. He was facing a decision. A choice. Made by two people. Conscious. Premeditated. Planned. And Logan, staring at the phone in his hands, murmured to himself, his voice firm, barely recognizing his own tone, "You made your choices, now you'll learn what that costs." Because at that moment, he knew. This was far from over. Here was just the beginning. Logan wasted no time. He transferred everything to his computer. Photos, videos, screenshots, conversations, audio files. Nothing escaped. Each detail became a named, dated file, organized like a timeline of a carefully built lie. A painful, humiliating, disgusting sequence. Once he finished organizing all the photos, videos, audios, and screenshots, Logan looked at the computer screen and knew exactly what he needed to do. He considered waiting for Claire to come home and confront her directly, but he realized that wouldn't be enough. The lies were too big, too filthy, to end in a simple argument between four walls. So he opened his email, created a new anonymous account, and started preparing what would, for many, be the worst day of their lives. He wrote a direct, blunt message with no room for doubt. It began like this: "You need to know who, in reality, are the people around you." And right after, he poured out the entire truth. He attached images. Photos that spoke louder than any words. Hidden kisses, holding hands, loving glances, plus the audios, the same ones that tore open his chest the first time he heard them. He was meticulous in selecting the recipient list. Claire's family. Daniel's family. Mutual friends. Co-workers. Bosses. And especially Vanessa, Daniel's wife. He scheduled the sending of all emails at once. And when he pressed that send button, it felt like triggering a bomb. There was no turning back. The effects began almost instantly. Within the company, Claire received the email in the middle of work. As soon as she opened it, she froze. Her eyes widened, her hands trembled, and the shock was so great her body gave out. She collapsed to the floor, unconscious, in front of everyone. Upstairs, Daniel also opened the email during an important meeting. The images appeared on the screen, and in the same second, he completely lost control. He tried minimizing the window, closing the laptop, but coworkers' stares were already fixed on him. The HR director stood up, looked straight at him, and said only, "Come with me." Now. The scandal spread like wildfire. WhatsApp groups, forwarded emails, people gossiping in the hallways. Clients began calling demanding explanations. Some even threatened to cancel contracts. And at Daniel's house, the impact was no smaller. Vanessa opened the email, saw every photo, listened to every audio, and for a few seconds, felt like her entire world was collapsing. She screamed, cried, threw the laptop onto the couch, and walked around the house in shock while the kids watched, frightened and confused. Logan, on the other side, silently observed everything unfold. His cell phone vibrated non-stop, messages coming in, voice notes, calls. But he ignored them all. He just took a deep breath and thought, "This is what you wanted to hide, huh? Well now, everyone knows." When Claire was called into the director's office, she walked in with a pale face and a trembling body. She knew exactly why. The photos, screenshots, and audios had spread like a virus. Opening the email earlier and seeing the files circulating among colleagues, managers, and even clients was enough for her to understand that her life had ended right there, in that place. As soon as Daniel entered, he shot a heavy glance at her and without hesitation snapped, "Is this real, Claire? Tell me you deleted those photos and conversations. How could you be so careless?" She tried to breathe, to hold back tears, but didn't answer. There was no response that could fix this. The director looked at both of them, took a deep breath, and got straight to the point without beating around the bush. "Do you understand how this tarnishes the company's image? Do you realize this has affected clients, partners, and even our institutional reputation? What you've done, besides being shameful, is completely incompatible with any ethical standard." He tossed a printed sheet onto the table. The image spoke for itself. HR added bluntly, effective immediately, "You are officially terminated from the company." And honestly, after what we've seen here, there's absolutely nothing more to discuss. Daniel pressed his hands against his face, turned his body, and before leaving the room, threw one last cutting remark at Claire, "Fix this with your husband, because whoever blew everything wide open was you." And he slammed the door behind him. Claire left the building with shaky legs, a tight chest, and an upset stomach. She drove home with trembling hands, barely able to hold the steering wheel. The fear of what she was about to face seemed to crush her from within. When she opened the door, she found Logan standing in the middle of the living room. His gaze seemed heavier than any scream. A look of someone who doesn't feel anger or sadness anymore. Only contempt. She took 2 steps forward, held her hands in front of her body, and her voice came out weak, broken, "Please, let me talk, let me explain." "I swear," Logan took a deep breath, interrupted her without raising his voice, "Pack your things. And leave my house." Claire froze. Tears came uncontrollably. "Please, Logan, let me speak. I beg you, don't do this." He shook his head and replied coldly, firmly, in the coldest tone she had ever heard from him, "You made your choice. Now live with it. You don't stay here anymore." She stood motionless, her whole body shaking, unsure whether to cry, beg again, or simply accept that this was the definitive end. And in that moment, she realized that everything, absolutely everything, was lost. The divorce was signed weeks later, without arguments, without prolonged hearings, without any attempt at reconciliation. Logan handled the process surgically, coldly, directly. He made sure to handle everything objectively, like closing a contract, like ending a cycle that no longer existed. Claire signed the papers with trembling hands, feeling each letter like knives slicing through her skin. The finality hit her when she received the official document. There it was, in black and white, the official end of the marriage. She spent weeks lost, dragging herself through her own thoughts, between guilt, regret, and that deafening silence that now filled her days. Shame felt physical. Going to the grocery store, walking down the street, looking at her reflection, all painful. She lost friends, lost the respect of her own family. Even her parents, who tried to support her, distanced themselves for a while. Messages went unanswered, invitations disappeared, and the only company she had left were her own thoughts, her own emptiness. Daniel, on the other hand, spiraled into chaos. He was kicked out of his house the same week he lost his job. Vanessa refused to hear anything. She threw his suitcases onto the sidewalk, blocked him on all networks, and made sure to tell every relative, every friend, and every acquaintance that the man she lived with for years destroyed their family. Their children, who until then saw him as a present father, started treating him like a stranger, a visitor who had done something unforgivable. He tried to rebuild. Knocked on doors of acquaintances looking for work, but the story spread so fast that doors closed before he could even touch them. He ended up living in a small rented apartment, with used furniture, a mattress on the floor, and a void that seemed to crush his chest. Vanessa, determined, focused on her children and her own peace. She moved forward without looking back, as if Daniel had ceased to exist. And, in fact, to her, he had. Claire, after months stuck in the same suffocating routine, understood that life wouldn't stop just so she could fix the past. She sought help, started therapy, threw herself into courses, occupied her mind with anything that could pull her out of that hole. In the middle of this process, she met someone. A man who, like her, carried scars. Divorced, father of a little girl, someone who knew exactly what it was like to watch his life fall apart. They started talking, built a friendship that, over time, turned into something more. And unlike everything she had experienced before, this time she learned to value what she had once thrown away. Time passed. Logan distanced himself from everything. Sold the house, left the city, changed states. Disappeared from social circles, groups, contacts. Lived for a while like he wanted to be invisible. And in this decision to step away, he found his own freedom. Rebuilt his life from scratch. Years later, at a family party hosted by Vanessa's niece, a familiar face walked through the door and for a few seconds, silence took over the entire room. Logan arrived. But different from the broken man everyone remembered, that was another man now. Lighter, more confident, happier. By his side stood a woman. And with her, 2 young children whose smiles proved he had started over, and started well. What stunned everyone was discovering who that woman was. An old friend of Vanessa's. Someone who, in the past, had tried to warn them, tried to open their eyes, tried to tell them. And who, back then, was ignored, dismissed, treated like someone meddling where she wasn't wanted. Logan looked around, greeted some people, politely smiled at others. His gaze crossed briefly with Daniel's, who was standing alone in the corner of the party, holding an empty glass, trying to seem invisible. Daniel lowered his eyes, unable to meet that stare. The silence was awkward. Claire, sitting farther away, watched the scene with a mix of shock, regret, and pain. She saw the man she once swore to love now happy, fulfilled, with a new family, while she held her own emptiness in her lap. Time, once again, made sure to teach, in the harshest way possible, that choices have consequences. That those who plant lies reap loneliness. Those who betray destroy not only the one betrayed but also their own lives. And however long it takes, life always finds a way to show that whoever destroys another person ends up destroying themselves. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.